please welcome Jeff Speck.
Hi, everybody. What a great crowd. I was told to expect, between 15 and 40, and I also love it when the room is just big enough to hold everybody, because then it even really looks crowded. And as usual, the 5 VIPs right here who were reserved didn't show up, so if any of you want to be, maybe people dining in the back want to be a little closer. I'm really excited about this talk today for a couple reasons. One, because I gave a 90-minute, 325-slide marathon lecture, which I had to race through yesterday morning, unveiling the plan for downtown Lowell, Massachusetts, which was all business. And I really had to show them the plan, and I had to convince them about the plan. And the plan had so much in it that it was a complete rush, and I couldn't relax. And there were 400 people in the audience at $100 a plate, so there was a lot of responsibility on me to do a good job. I was a little uncomfortable unveiling a plan for a city in a breakfast where you had to pay $100 to get in, but they had to raise money for the plan, so that's how it goes. But I'm also excited because, to get to participate in Art Prize, which I know nothing about, and I'll know a lot more about, I know a little bit about, but I'll know a lot more about it tomorrow after I've spent more time walking around and looking at the pieces that I've been asked to review. I'm judging the best use of an urban space category, which is really fun for me. But I'm also really excited about this talk because it's a chance for me to talk about my work as an art. And I've always been, I was trained in art. My first master's was in art history, and I went from art into architecture and then into city planning. And I've always thought much more now about what I do as a craft than an art. But the art that I like the best is art which is also a craft. And I think W.R. Letheby said more than 100 years ago, he said, art is the doing well of that which needs to be done. And that's the approach that I bring very much to the work that I do. But you have some, forgive me for not knowing Grand Rapids as well as I should after having been here maybe 20 times in the last 3 years. But you have some organization that says their motto is, what is your art? And I kind of took that as my motivation for this lecture. So what I'm going to show you is the broad scale in which I'm working, which is from, two extremes in that scale. One is the entire downtown of a city, which is Lowell, Massachusetts. As I mentioned, we're doing the plan. And then the other is my own house. And I'm also interested in that comparison because of Alberti's famous quote, "The city is a house, and the city is a large house, and the house is a small city," and that there are similarities between the two. I'm not going to dwell on that, but I think it's a nice framing device. So before I kick it off, let me just say, I love Grand Rapids. Oh, phone's off. I'm turning my phone off. I've been in Grand Rapids more than any other city except my own over the last few years. And we've been talking a lot about making the downtown more walkable. I'm working on a project right now with Steve Fry and Mike Van Shelven and their firm, Van Skelven, on Lion Square. And the end of Lion Street as it meets the river, and making that a more successful space. And that's what's brought me here a lot. But we've also had a lot more general talks about making the downtown more livable. And I promised the people like Eileen in the back who have heard me give talks like this 20 or 30 times that this would be different, and it will be different. But I do want to talk about some of the fundamentals that underlie the practice. So there'll be a brief bit of background. So we're going to talk first about the Lowell Downtown Evolution Plan. And it's called an evolution plan because Lowell has come a long way. And I don't know if you guys know Lowell, but it's where Jack Kerouac is from, and Ed McMahon. And it was known, when I was growing up in nearby Belmont, Massachusetts, it was known as a real pit. And through great public investment, the decision lobbied for very hard to locate a national park in the downtown, taking advantage of all the beautiful mills and canals that exist there. They've really gotten back on their feet. And so this is called an evolution plan because they don't need to start over in any way. So I'm a city planner, which means I do two types of work. I work on making old places better. This is South Beach in Miami, where I lived for a decade. And we measure places like this, and we study their successes, but we study them physically in order to build new places like this. This is just one of many projects of my old firm, Dwani Plater Zyberk, where we create new towns that are organized based on the old towns that we also work in. But what distinguishes a new urbanist planner, which I am proud to say I am, from most of the planners who preceded them, is this idea that we can find the solutions for existing places, for new places in existing places, but also that the success of existing older places comes into making them more like themselves. For about 50 years, planners thought that they could make the city compete better against the suburbs by making it more like the suburbs, to make driving more convenient, parking more convenient, and to bring all sorts of suburban building types, the strip center, with the parking in front, et cetera, into the city. And we've since learned that that was a horrible mistake, and the new urbanists kind of led that discussion. I was brought here by CEOs for Cities originally, and Carol Coletta, who some of you may know. And, Carol's expertise, I think I have a good picture here, is programming. And this is, you all know this situation that occurred last year that I show in all my lectures to all of my cities. And I talk about how so much about what makes the city successful is the stuff that you choose to do in it and put in it, like having the right size convention center and the right size arena and having events that make it happen. But that's not enough. What's also necessary is the day-to-day, everyday street life, or what we planners call pedestrian culture. And Carol brought me in to the work that she was doing here in Grand Rapids. I remember the first phone call I had with Ginny and Eileen, and Carol said to me, "You got to talk to these ladies who are organizing my visits here and explain to them why you are necessary." And the discussion is, your city needs to satisfy certain criteria physically, or it will not generate this sort of scene. And so, bringing that approach to Lowell. Lowell is a city that has great beauty. I say it's gritty, not pretty, but it has wonderful old mill buildings and canals. And looking at a city like that, if a vital city, or a city like yours, is a city with street life, how do you get people to walk? And everything I do as a planner is based on the fact that the greatest single measure of the success of your city is, do you see people out on the streets when you're there, and specifically in the downtown? Because the downtown is the one part of the city that belongs wherever you live. The downtown is the one part of the city that belongs to everybody, right? And so it's also your hallmark, and it's your best sales tool. So in the downtown, how do you get people to walk? You need to have a reason to walk. This is the quick review. I'm going to blow through it. A reason to walk, which has to do with balancing uses properly. A safe walk, which is feeling safe, being safe and feeling safe. A comfortable walk, which has to do with spatial definition of feeling enclosed, which I'll describe, and being properly oriented. And an interesting walk, signs of humans all around. The reason to walk is pretty straightforward. Jane Jacobs said, "No one will ever walk from sameness to sameness, even if the effort expended is minimal." And that what most cities have been doing in recent years, the ones that are moving forward, is to look at all the different uses that should be balanced in your downtown, so you can have a 24-hour city, so you can have spaces occupied and supervised all around the clock, and what's missing and underrepresented. In most cities, it's housing. And certainly in Grand Rapids, it's housing. And often when housing is missing, retail can't become what it should become. Jane Jacobs also talked about Wall Street. And when she was writing about Wall Street, thousands and tens of thousands of people worked in Wall Street. But Wall Street did not have one good restaurant, because you can't support a good restaurant just with lunch trade. And you can't support a good laundromat, a good anything, unless you have people there all times a day. So once you get the balance right, then the retail and the other things start to work as well. In terms of a safe walk, that has to do with basically humans versus cars. It's not crime like it used to be. You're much greater risk, both physically and then in terms of how you feel about walking around a city, from cars than you are from humans with handguns. So I always tell cities, and I've told people here, you just got to be careful, because this is what America's been building mostly. Most of what we've built in America in the past 50 years has been this. And the engineers who are doing this from Monday to Thursday, well, on Friday they're working in your city. And they have the same books, and they're using the same curb radiuses, and they're using the same curb radiuses and the same stacking requirements, and the same, design speed. They want to maintain 30 miles an hour everywhere so that when cars are going 40, they won't crash. Well, we don't want cars going 40. We want them going 30, so we should design it for 20. And so we need to apply standards to the city that are appropriate to the city, and not create a bunch of mini highways through our city. This is Oklahoma City, where I'm working, the least walkable city in America, according to Prevention Magazine, hired me to do a walkability study. What could be better, right? That's a nice thing to be able to say. And we're transforming the whole downtown because they have money. They have $140 million to spend on 180 acres, and we're rebuilding every street from building face to building face. And we're getting rid of travel lanes, streets that have too many lanes, streets that have too wide lanes, because if a lane is too wide, drivers go too fast. And we're getting rid of too many lanes going in the same direction, because one-ways also tend to both hurt business and scare pedestrians. So this is a typical street in Oklahoma City, where you have 13-foot travel lanes all going in the same direction. And here's the transformation, back to two-way, 10-foot travel lanes. There's room now for a 5-foot bikeway, which is very important, on both sides of the street. And then at intersections, you can have a center turn lane. And the interesting thing is that a 3-lane road with a center turn lane carries just as much traffic as a 4-lane road with no turn lane. And it does it twice as safely, with half the accidents and a quarter of the injuries. And then there's the size of blocks. So this is the most walkable on the left and the least walkable parts of the downtown of Lowell. And it has to do with when you have lots of streets, the streets can be small. And when you have fewer streets, those streets have to be big. And actually a California study of 40 cities found that the cities with blocks twice as large had 4 times as many pedestrian and vehicular accidents. So you try to reinstate a finer grain block network where you can. And then one-ways where, think about your state of mind as you're driving on a one-way street, and how there's always you're driving on a multi-lane street. Because one-ways, when you take a city street and you make it one-way, it's usually multiple lanes. And think about your state of mind. The other lane, right, is always the faster lane. Like, I just need to get into the other lane because I got to pass this jerk that's in front of me. And you can't enter that frame of mind when there's only one lane in each direction. So that's important. And then just to have the sheer mass of vehicles in multiple lanes all going the same direction without any opposing traffic to scare them into possibility of a collision causes them to go more quickly. Left-hand turn lanes when too long. This is a 200-foot long left-hand turn lane that serves an intersection here that serves 4 houses. And that's because this is a DOT road, and the DOT has killed all these businesses by putting a left-hand turn lane in and removing the on-street parking. The on-street parking protects the sidewalk. It's a barrier of steel between you and the moving vehicles, so it's also important. And street trees. Also, we're sorry this fellow hit the tree, but the tree protects pedestrians, and also when there are street trees, people drive more slowly. So these are all ingredients, and even swoops. Anything that speaks of a highway vocabulary, like we call these stream form geometrics. Anything that swoops tells pedestrians that this is a place for cars first. So that's a safe walk. A comfortable walk has to do with spatial definition. All animals seek 2 things, prospect and refuge. You want to be able to see your prey and your predators, and you want to feel like your back is covered. And that's why the same traffic engineers who remount our streets and make them wider and faster, when it's time for their vacation, they go to places like Split, Yugoslavia, and hang out in plazas like these because they feel comfortable. It's spatially defined. It's an outdoor living room. People want to be in outdoor living rooms. And people have been talking about this since the Renaissance, the ratio of width to height of street spaces, and how you can knit 2 neighborhoods together simply by creating a little outdoor living room. In this case, it's a bridge across a highway in Ohio, but effectively created a walkable link where there was none because of that desire for enclosure. And then finally, this is wonderful. I'm sorry to say I show this all around the country. This is wonderful, but this is the same spatial definition, and it's not really cutting it. And this is the main walk between the 2 great hotels in downtown Grand Rapids. On the left, you have a parking garage, and on the right, you have a hotel that has taken the parking garage as inspiration for its facade. And I love the JW. I just don't love this part of the JW. It's where I ask to stay when I come here. It's a great building. Actually, it's a world-class building. But you need signs of humanity to cause you to wish to want to walk. Humans are among the social primates. Nothing interests us more than other humans. And so there need doors and windows. It only takes 25 feet of building to hide 250 feet of garage. if you do it right. And this is what the smart cities are doing now and insisting upon. Joe Riley, Joe Riley will not allow you to build a parking garage in Charleston unless you do something like this. He's been the mayor of Charleston for 9 4-year terms. So that's it. So then the downtown plan for Lowell is this huge document that I'm very proud of, and we finally finished it. It has all these different chapters. I'm not going to show you all of them, but we're going to start with just talking about the process. And the process was me moving with my family to the city for a month. I really believe that you can't plan a city if you live in a city, because as Andres Duany says, the local is the expert in the art of the impossible. Someone will say, we need to move that house, and say, oh, the owner lives in Jamaica. We can't move the house. That's because you live here and you know the problems. But planning, the missing ingredient in any planning discussion is typically time. It's like, just add water. Planning, just add time. And you have to understand that you're planning for 5, 10, 20 years out. If you're planning for 20 years out, then you know that the owner in Jamaica will eventually sell the house, or someone will eventually go to Jamaica and get the owner and make that change. So you can't be typically locals are impeded by their intimate knowledge of all the impediments that exist to changing cities. But then if you don't live in a city, how can you come to know it well enough and know the people well enough and know well enough what the people want in order to make it a better place? And my solution, which I pioneered in this little exercise, was I took my very pregnant wife and my toddler and we moved there, lived on the river in a loft, and I took my kid to daycare on the river walk every day, and I had to schedule an extra 15 minutes into every appointment because someone would stop me on the street. And everyone got to know me, and people would stop me on the street, and that's where I really learned. It wasn't in the meetings. That's where I really learned what was going on, was the being cornered on the street, and then dinners and drinks late into the night with the different people in the neighborhood, and including our neighbors, the Kersners, who are empty nesters, who have money, who decided to live in Lowell because it's a NORC, it's a naturally occurring retirement community. It provides all of their daily needs without them having to drive. And you can walk for a decade or more longer than you can drive, and probably 20 years longer than you should drive. So cities are attractive to these people. So activities downtown, Lowell is well ahead of Grand Rapids in terms of inviting people to come downtown, and in 10 years they've gone from 1,500 people downtown. Let me get this right. I think they've gone from about 1,500 units downtown to about 4,000 units downtown in 10 years. And it used to be 50% subsidized, and now it's 20% subsidized. And it's because of these beautiful old mill buildings. And you look at opportunity, and parking capacity is money in the bank. Lowell has 5 downtown parking garages that all have this curve, with one exception, have this curve. They're full in the day and they're empty at night. So anyone who can locate an apartment or a loft, condo, close to an existing parking structure, the parking is free and it's protected. And so you locate new housing where the parking is and where the developer doesn't have to build the parking. Great retail, but a mix that will be enhanced as more people choose to live there. Some office. The question is, where can we put more office? And where can we put more office in this economy? And the answer is, well, where is there more parking available during the day? And there's one place I'll show you where that exists. And this incredible collection of canals that come together at this place called the Lower Locks, that is physically a great space, and in terms of its water and everything, it's a great space, but it's very scruffy, as you'll see, and it's the opportunity for the city to have a new wow attractor that will take it to the next level in terms of tourist attraction and people wanting to live there. And the National Park presence, which has done a great job in terms of reusing the mills, inviting people to Lowell, and helping to take care of the city. But kind of a model in terms of understanding the city as a living museum. And then anchors or entertainment venues. So we're looking now, right, we're going through all the different uses that are in the downtown, thinking about how they're connected to each other. Paul Tsongas is their most famous recent local son, and he helped create, and thus it was named after him, the Tsongas Center, which is a great large sports and event venue, but no one ever walks to it because it's not that far away, but it's a horrible walk, and it's a natural anchor. And then no hotel anywhere in the downtown. I had to stay out by the highway when I came to this pretty large downtown. So that was looking at activities. And then in terms of streets in general, there's this now having been practiced for 20 years, but really seriously for 10 years, there has become a standard best practices way to fix the streets in a downtown. And it has to do with all those criteria that I mentioned to you before, that we went through in terms of making them feel safe. But now it's been applied in enough cities that we know how to do it and how it works. And it has to do with fixing, in this case, fixing the one-ways. They have a horrible one-way system, and welcoming bikes, while spending as little money as possible, which is why we're going to start to fix it right away. Many American cities have applied one-way systems. You suffer from it very little compared to most American cities. Most of them grids, perfect grids, like Oklahoma City, where the traffic engineers came in and said, we want to move as many cars through as quickly as possible, and they just went, left, right, left, right, left, right, north, then a south, then a north, then a south, an east, then a west. They came to Lowell and they did it there too, because if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And Lowell looked like a nail, but Lowell is not a nail because it has this cranky medieval street system. It has very few, it has places where there are very few connections because of the canals and difficulty in crossing places. Notice the discontinuities. And as a result of applying this one-way system to the city, this is the trip now. Look at this. If you want to get from the Civic Center, from the Lowell Auditorium where you go to see a show, to the Lower Locks Garage where you're supposed to park for that show, look at the drive you have to make. Similarly, if you want to get from the main way into town to the most popular downtown parking garage, look at the loop you have to make. And if you want to get from City Hall to an event that night at the Tsongas Center, look at the loop you have to make. Right? It's crazy. And I told them, I said, they had traffic engineers recently, the usual suspects saying, to change the system now would cause undue backups, and it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I told them, it broke. Okay, I have a great sense of direction. I've driven around Rome, and I've never been as lost in the 15 minutes it took me, completely lost and angry, trying to find City Hall in Lowell the first time I went there. So it's broken. So this is how it is, and this is what we're doing. And we can't reorient the Main Street Merrimack because, for political reasons, frankly. We could do it, but politically we can't. It's just too hard. But we're reverting, the black is two-way. We're reverting all of these one-ways to two-ways. And if you wanted to get into downtown from the west side before, you're coming in on Merrimack, which is the main way in, and you would have to do this. If you want to get to the arena, you have to go all the way around like that to get to the arena. Now we've added both a left-hand turn here and a straight here. So you can at least this is a key block that we've converted. So you can now at least get into this area and enjoy the downtown. So it doesn't throw you out. It doesn't push you out when you try to come into it. And that's very important. And then bicycles are a couple things. One, the sort of people that you want to attract to your city, the millennials, the engines of entrepreneurship. This is Carol Coletta talking now from CEOs for Cities. Every great invention you can think of was invented by someone under 30. It's a fact. And these are the people that are going to make your city, sing and have a future. And the conversation I've had with some of the people in your community is simpler. It's like, how do I get my kids to stay? How do I get my grandkids to stay? And if you want to attract these people and keep them here, you need to have a biking system, because that's one of the things that's the main way. I'm a little old for a millennial, but the main way I get around Washington where I live is on bicycle. It's just a better way to get around. But also, what kind of city are you? Do you want to be known as a city that's forward-thinking, that's sustainable, that's progressive, that welcomes young people? And the bike paths, I always say, yes, they're a feature of they're a piece of infrastructure, but they're also an advertisement. And this green stripe down, this street in Manhattan tells people we are a hip happening city, not that Manhattan needs it. But also, they increased biking in 1 year in Manhattan by 35% simply by investing in green paint. In 1 year. So, you can do the same thing, and that's what I was telling Lowell. So here's the bike plan, and we're limited by these narrow New England streets, but there are ways to fit bicycles into them in a way, not every street, but enough streets so you can get everywhere you need to get in the city. So that all leads us to the street reconfigurations, and I'm going to look at the time just so I get a chance to show you everything. And the street reconfigurations have to do with taking this street, which has the nice kind of Friends-style coffee shop on it, but is a superhighway. Big fat lanes all going in the same direction, 50 miles an hour regularly, we're told. and taking it from this configuration, where you have 3 lanes, 3 fat lanes in the same direction, and turning it into here you have a turn lane at the corner, but you can see that the parking picks up away from the corner. It's basically 2 lanes and parking on both sides. Easy to do. No room for bike lanes on that street, but it's an important change. Here's the superhighway that takes you down to the Tsongas Center, to the arena that you may recognize there at the end of the way, but no one walks it because the space is poorly defined, but also because the street feels like a highway. Here's the configuration of that highway, and you can see we've got 12-foot travel lanes. And a 12-foot travel lane is a 65-mile-an-hour lane. Well, this is a 30-mile-an-hour zone. So why do we have a 65-mile-an-hour lane? So by simply reconfiguring it, we find room for bike lanes. And now the lanes are the right length, the right width, and the bikes can fit. And this is all going to happen within a year. Here's a one-way street with a 14-foot lane, and we're going so far as to say, okay, make it 2-way. 9-foot travel lanes. There are plenty of these streets all over the country, and the engineers will say, oh, you can't do it, you can't do it. Well, that's interesting, we found this street in Lowell, and no one's dying on it, right? So you just have to demonstrate that these models exist. You wouldn't do a 9-foot lane on a very busy street, but this isn't a very busy street. So we have short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions. The short-term are all just paint. The mid-term involve a little bit of construction. Then the long-term is even a streetcar boulevard I haven't even told you about. I'm not going to tell you about signals and crosswalks. I'm not going to tell you about transit, but they're both very important. I am going to tell you about transit. I'm not going to tell you about signals and crosswalks. Except to say you should never have to push a button and ask for a light. Okay, pedestrians are not second-class citizens. And also, cities have either usually what's called a concurrent system or a dedicated system. In most cities that are friendly cities to pedestrians, the pedestrians walk with the cars that are going in the same direction. If the car wants to take a turn it waits, right? But a lot of cities have dedicated where you have to wait for all the cars to go before you cross. It gives the pedestrian much less time to cross, and it makes them wait much longer, and walking cities don't have that. I told them, they're really serious about transit. They have the beginnings of a transit system. They're thinking about expanding it quite significantly. And I said, bring it on. But if you're going to bring it on, you've got to make a commitment to do certain things right. And the routes have to be clear and comprehensible. How you pay has to be clear to a stranger who sees the car, the streetcar in the street. But also, if you can't guarantee headways of 15 minutes or less, don't build it. Because people, 15 minutes per train, 18 hours a day, 15 minutes between trains. People do not look at schedules. They don't want to have to look at a schedule. You want to be able to show up at a stop, be told when the next train is coming, and have it never be more than 15 minutes away. Or the system will not be successful. Don't spend your millions. I'm not going to talk about these two issues. Here's the heart of the plan, and this is similar to a very cursory study that I did in a few days of your downtown. But the concept is a walkability analysis and urban triage. Triage is a battlefield term. You save the soldiers that can be saved, and you ignore the soldiers that are going to die because you need to limit your resources to those places where they can be of use. It's pretty mercenary. But what it means in cities is that you can have an excellent city that is only partially walkable. Most cities that are excellent cities only are 10, 20, 30% of them, which is the walkable core. And you need to define that core and understand most city leaders, most government, most planning department members feel this need to sprinkle the fairy dust evenly, to make pedestrian improvements everywhere, even in areas where no one's going to walk anyway. And what you have to realize is, as the government, is that if the private realm, if the buildings framing the street aren't doing their job and aren't about to do their job, you shouldn't bother investing in making them more walkable in terms of how the streets work, because people aren't going to walk anyway. So you have to define where walkability is possible and where it's impossible, but also where it's necessary, where you don't have it. And so understanding that spatial definition is really important, and that the city has streets that work very well in terms of attracting pedestrians already, and other streets that don't. You walk around the city and you look very carefully. So this is the downtown of Lowell. And what you see in green are the streets, we were just on this street, for example, are the streets that are excellent. And you can tell they're excellent because they're bounded by these black objects, of course, which are the buildings that give them shape. This discussion has nothing to do with the roadways. It has to do with how is the private realm shaping the street, right? How are the buildings shaping the street? Then what you see in yellow, well, what you see in white, what you see unmarked, are those streets that aren't part of that network of walkability. They're not good to walk on, and they're not going to be. And furthermore, they're not important. They're not connecting anchors in important ways. But then what you see over here is you see the Tsongas Center and the path to it. Here you see the baseball field, which 40 nights a week has tens of thousands of people in it. I'm sorry, has, I guess, 5,000 people in it, 40 nights a week, none of whom ever touch the downtown, because this area between it, what you see in yellow, just doesn't feel walkable. And so the yellow streets are the defined spaces where the interventions are needed. Change is needed in the private realm now to embrace the public realm, to once we've accomplished safety, to make it comfortable and to make it interesting. And so that leads then to interventions. And what you have are short-term, mid-term, and long-term interventions. I'm going to show you one of each. So the short-term interventions are, I won't describe to you what they are, but here's a typical one. And it's one that's going to happen. There's this university called, this college, Middlesex Community College, that exists right in the heart of the downtown. It's like an Ile de la Cité floating in the middle of the canal system. And they've got one very attractive building to the top and one very unattractive building to the bottom. But this parking lot between them, which has always been there, this is a former Wang Corporation training center. This is the walk between dinner and the show. And people will park, go to dinner, drive and park, and go to the show because they're walking past this parking lot, which has very nice trees, in the spring, but no one wants to walk in this kind of boring environment. So the solution is to take the existing site and turn it into a campus green. And so, I sat with the leadership at the college, and fortunately, those are the people who park in this lot. This is the VIP lot. There's a structured lot, 5-minute walk away. So, okay, can we move? Sure, we can park behind the federal building, we can drop people off on the curb. So let's make a green that is now brands our campus and makes it a place. We have this campus that people can't imagine it as a campus. So we're going to make it a real college campus in the heart of the downtown, and we can sell our school based on the beauty of it, and a fountain and benches and nice paths and trees and hiding what you need to hide and framing the views up towards the federal building, which is a very nice building. They've already essentially approved it. And so this is what that'll look like, replacing the parking lot. So you find out what's possible and what isn't. There were twice as many suggestions as there are solutions because these are the things that can happen, particularly the short-term ones. Short-term means it can happen, there's momentum for it to happen soon. Mid-term means it can happen, and can happen once there's momentum, but now there's no momentum. So we say, okay, 5 to 10 years out. And again, planning is about the future. And if you don't, I always say, planning is not about putting lines on a map and saying, build this now. Planning is creating a mold. And the mold, what the mold receives as clay is economic energy. And it shapes that economic energy into a physical outcome that will cause your city to be successful. If you don't have that mold, if you don't have that plan in place, then it's going to drop here and there without anything connecting to anything else and without creating that synergy that you need for your city to succeed. And so some of these now, the midterm interventions, people are just like, well, that can't happen now. And you say, no, but you permit it now. So when it does happen, there's no impediments. And then you'll see the long-term interventions, they're just dreams. But a lot of great things have happened in cities that were just dreams. And if they weren't dreamed and planned and drawn and believed in, they would have never happened either. So you need to do all three of those things. So midterm, four suggestions. I'm going to show you Cox Circle. This is the one place in the plan, that garage to the right is the one garage that actually has its peaks in the evening because of the events that are in that auditorium. So, and look at it. It's a future DuPont circle, right? It's a circle. It's a nicely shaped space, but it's not contained in any way by street walls that turn it from a space to a place, right? And it's got these 22-foot wide travel lanes encircling this circle that only need to be 12 feet wide. And you see all these empty lots. And this is all the spaces in this parking garage are a gold mine for future office that doesn't need to build parking because the parking's already there, essentially for free. So you take this area and you do a little bit of land swapping between the city and a post office, but you put buildings surrounding the circle and just basically filling up the empty space, but giving street walls to that circle. And then as you can see, the street gets narrower, and in that extra space you put a sidewalk with trees, you draw the desire lines across the central circle, you put the trees around the center, and it's a perfect urban square. It happens to be round. So and then you make sure there's a cafe or a restaurant in the floor of one of these, in the ground floor of one of these buildings to serve people who pour in and out of the arena. And you've got the next great, mixed-use office hub for Lowell. And they're very excited about that too, but that's a midterm solution. And then, and that's what this looks like. And it's important to have artists who can make these things comprehensible to people who don't like to read plans. And then finally, the long-term interventions, which I said are dreams. And I'm just going to show you one of them that typifies it. But Lowell is a city, in some ways like Grand Rapids, that it's a riverfront city. Lowell's got it worse than Grand Rapids because the proper place to build the mills was up against the rivers, blocking the rivers, because they use the rivers for energy and they use the rivers for dumping stuff. And so the rivers are blocked off. You can spend all day in downtown Lowell and not know that you're up against the mighty Merrimack River. There are very few opportunities to change that, but there's one underutilized block up against the river. It's a couple parking lots where we could actually create an Ocean Drive type situation. And it drops. So the idea is to build up the whole thing by using a parking structure on the lower level, to build up the whole thing to the upper level and to create a promontory and an overlook above the river that has a street on it that takes you through and actually encircles the site. So it's not just like this suburban destination or pod, it's actually an urban block that's knitted into the fabric of the city, and you can drive around it. And then using the extra parking capacity that you can see with this dashed line that floats the construction of, that is where you have the parking for mid-rise residential. You've got a green against the edge, a square against the edge, places for sitting out and dining, or maybe one bagel place, and then an amphitheater type area that steps down to the river walk that exists along that edge already on the river. And that looks like this, and you can see even this lower edge, there it is, this lower edge against the water. You can even have row houses here hiding the edge of the garage. So this is going to be the best address in Lowell when this is built, and you can pull a barge up and have a concert and really have a special, something that Lowell lacks, which is a spectacular riverfront location. And by the way, the site that you all have here down near the crab restaurant, I call it the Crab Shack, but it's much nicer than a shack, south of Fulton, that's the site where you have an opportunity to do something just like this. That's your last great site in the heart of your downtown. And then the high school, they wanted to move the high school out of town because it was inadequate, but they wanted to keep it in town, as they should, because it's a great asset in the downtown. It brings all these kids to the downtown. These kids asked me to take their picture, and then they wanted me to start an email relationship with them so I could send them the picture. I said I thought that was a bad idea. But the kids give tremendous life to downtown Lowell. And it would be a real pity, a horrible pity to lose the high school in the downtown. Plus the busing costs. The kids come to school now on the public bus system, which they float with all their presence on it. But the existing high school, particularly its 1980s wing, which wasn't even designed by a high school architect, is falling apart. And the problem is there's no room on its site to make it any better. But this is a really in bad shape doctor's office with like 4 doctors in it. And we're going to convince them. They know that we're going to ask them to move. And if you get rid of those doctors, or perhaps put them on a site that's across the street right here that I'll show you, you can then transform the high school. And what you can do is, step 1, put the doctors, so yellow is demolition and red is construction. Put the doctors, or perhaps someone else, in the site across the street. Demolish the doctor's office. Build the field house. Demolish the existing field house. Build a wing of classrooms and a cafeteria. Demolish the old cafeteria. Work the school around with the final wing. And notice we're now lining those streets that didn't have buildings lining them properly. Demolish the last piece, build the final connector in the system, put the library on it. And what you get is you're going from this. So that drive, Arcan Drive, was that horrible view down to the Tsongas Center because it was poorly defined by these buildings that stepped back from it. And this is another street that was bad edges. And now we're giving it a great edge all the way along it. We're putting the cafeteria here, the field house here, the library here. We're creating a big green space that was completely lacking. The green was all wasted, residual, leftover space. And now we have a big central green space for hanging out, for throwing a ball around, for band practice. I've even put yard signs on it so you can play football on it. And there's the proposal. We're keeping the whole old building of the high school because it functions perfectly well, and they don't have to move it out of town. And they're embracing this as well. So, and then finally the lower locks, the one great space I told you about in the heart of the city, beautifully shaped, scruffy, kind of rural in its conception. Just going to take you around it, and you can see that it's a great space, but you've got parking lots up against the water where plazas should be. You've got a huge and ungainly handicap ramp where a tilted plaza could connect this building to the water. Very rural. And then you've got models like the Riverwalk in Providence, where they removed parking lots and train tracks to re-expose their river and create this kind of space. And San Antonio's Riverwalk, which is in some ways more appropriate because it's the backs of buildings facing the space. And then a plan that I won't take you into all of the details, but a living museum like the National Park has already done with the city, like Seattle's Sculpture Garden, where we're going to fill it up with industrial water power machinery, because that's what Lowell was all about. Now, this is a 20-year dream. This is always a planning of the dreaming sort. And it has to be embraced by the city and taken forward by the city. And by city, I mean the people. I don't mean the government. For it to happen, it can't just be a planner's dream. But in Lowell, that's happened before. So you've got to start with something. So reconfiguring that space into something more urban, full of art, with plazas and better details, stone and metal instead of wood and grass. Opening up a plaza against the existing street, that's where number 4 is. We're working our way around the plan. Those are the steps where the handicap ramp was, right? I'd go on, but I want to show you other stuff. So that's the plan for Lowell. And we talk about implementation as well. I'm not going to get into that with you all, except to say that I worked on a plan in my old firm for downtown Baton Rouge. And in 10 years, of the 105 recommendations, 93 were accomplished. And I'm talking planetariums, art museums, hotels, big stuff. And the reason it was accomplished is because they created an entity, Plan Baton Rouge, that only existed for the sake of pushing the plan forward. So someone woke up every morning and said, what can I do today to advance this plan? And that's how you get plans to happen. So if you ever do that for downtown here, which I've been advocating for some time, you need to also have an entity that's going to push it. It can't be a city planning department which is responsible for so many other things. It really has to be something focused like a razor on that one thing. So the entirely other scale, so that's what I do for business. This is what I do for fun. This is me, this is Bacardi by night. Jeff Speck, Bacardi by night. This is a house about a city. This is the L'Enfant plan for DC. Incredible plan. People say, oh, it's just like Paris. Well, guess what? It was 50 years before Paris. There was nothing like this except Wren's plans that never got built for London after the Great Fire of London. But it's a gridiron that's sliced everywhere by these diagonals. And the diagonals, which connect monumental spaces, create all these weird leftover sites and flat iron sites. And my wife and I rented a zip car, car share, and we drove all around the city with a map, and we visited every pointy lot because, I said, I want to build a house that's about Washington. And what makes Washington special is that the Flatiron Building, right, in New York City, well, there's only a few of those in New York City where Broadway slices the grid, but DC is full of these lots, and worse yet, they're underutilized because the zoning does not acknowledge that a Flatiron lot needs special zoning for it to be buildable. So I found the one at the very tip of the plan. And you're looking at the block. The very tip of this block is the lot that I found. And it was considered unbuildable, so it was cheap. It was in a neighborhood that you can see needed some investment. It was full of trash and other things. And the zoning said that I couldn't put a building on it. But I knew that there were smart people in the planning department. And in the Board of Zoning Appeals, there were smart people. The zoning said that I had to park a car on the site. So the site was 500 square feet. That was the site. And there you have a look at it. You can see that it's a bookshelf. It's 2 bookshelves that lack a bookend. All these buildings are culminating at the corner, and then it just dies in this wasted space. You can see the vocabulary of the houses. You can see what the houses nearby look like, some unfortunate 3rd-story additions that just bad design, but bumping up a 3rd floor is perfectly reasonable in this neighborhood. A lot of people are doing it. And an established rhythm, an established pattern of windows and doors. And this is the site then. Simply taking taking the existing street walls, bringing them together to a point, having it be a sharp point was really important to me. And filling the lot is how you create a flat iron building. And so this is the second floor, but this is the essence of the plan. And now I'm talking to the architects or the armchair architects in the audience. But what makes this plan work is dropping a rectangle in the triangle. And then what I tell people is it's a wood rectangle dropped in a brick triangle with two residual spaces that are both metal. One is the stairway that I'll show you, and one is the now the wood-burning stove area that's also metal. And by also another permission that I needed to get from the city, but by getting this overhang in here, it gave me enough room to fit living, dining, and kitchen all on one floor. Again, it's a 500 square foot lot. This is 12 feet from side to side. 12 feet is Le Corbusier's existence minimum. You know, that was the standard measurement for a worker's dwelling. You know, you didn't want to get narrower than 12 feet. Unfortunately, this is exactly 12 feet, and this is exactly 12 feet. You'll notice that this is that rectangle. That rectangle is this wall brought through the house. I also took this wall through the house and created this rectangle, which then becomes the balconies on the west side, which are up against the quieter street of the house. So the first floor, which doesn't yet have the overhangs, and I'm going to take you through it, but there's an entry, the stairway, a bedroom, which is my office. This is where Speck & Associates is based. Not much room for associates. Bathroom, laundry, and a little media room where we took advantage. This is the only space in the house. This is what I'd get in trouble at the Harvard GSD because I broke the partie. I messed with the scheme. Every room was oriented north-south, but here was an opportunity to be symmetrical within the triangle. So I tilted this wall, and now you have a symmetrical triangular space, which I'll show you. I showed you the main floor already. This is a floor up now, the third floor, master bedroom, hallway. You draw this curtain, and this hallway becomes a walk-in closet, nursery, and a bathroom. And you can pass through the bathroom to get to the nursery. Another balcony here, as on the main floor. And what's turned into here, a shaft that brings heat from the wood-burning stove up into the master bedroom from the living room. And then a roof. So this is the first design for the elevation of the front of the house, the face against the busier street, the face that's more modern, seeing more traffic, and the entry you can see there, and you can see the bay window sticking out. The view from the other side, where I've picked up the rhythm of the existing buildings and started another row house and then broken it out towards the corner into something more modern. The model that I built to get approval from the planning department. I hadn't done one of these for about 15 years in architecture school. And the fact that I was required by law to remove a parking space from the street, to break the historic granite curb, to bring a driveway into my house and park a car, replacing a public good with a private good, right? Replacing a public space with a private space. It took me 9 months to get rid of that. And when I talked to the zoning commissioners, I showed them my wallet. I didn't bribe them. I said, on the left is my Metro Pass, on the right is my zip card for car share. We don't own a car, why must we have a garage? And we were successful. So there you see it. So this is the view from the corner. You can see how it picks up the vocabulary, both of the houses to the left and the industrial building to the right, which is a Howard University processing center. So I'm just going to take you through the plan now. This is the only view I have. I'm sorry, this was one of the magazine articles. This is the only view I have of the entry. You can see the door to one side, the stair, which is all steel. The stair is 5 tons, 3/8-inch plate steel, made in Minnesota. It's the least sustainable aspect of the house. Brought out by a flatbed truck, dropped in by a crane. You see here the media room, the bathroom, my niche for all my building collection. Then my office is behind this glass wall here. So that was, we were standing looking down the stairs at that spot. And then here's looking back the other way, there's the metal stair and looking into my office. That's the view from my office. All the rooms that face the stair have views of the stair because it was the biggest investment in the house and I wanted to see it all the time. So that was the view from in there. Now here's the media room. So the VCR is in the closet and there's a hole in the door. We also keep the strollers in the closet, the vacuum cleaners in the closet. And this is the room, the one room that's symmetrical within the triangle. And that's, that's there. And then that's there. And then coming upstairs now to the second floor, that's the view from the front of the living room past the dining room to the kitchen. I don't need to show you where that is in the plan, but then that's the bay window that makes the living room square. Built-in steel bench that continues to its left to be the basis for the fire, for the wood-burning stove. A lot of green features in this house, 2.5 kilowatts of solar power on the roof, solar water heater, bamboo floors. This stove, when you put wood in it, it gives off less carbon than if you were to let the wood decompose by itself in the forest. But none of that green stuff matters as much as the fact that we don't own a car. It's insignificant. It's statistically insignificant compared to the fact that we don't drive around the city. A couple more views of just the living room. So it feels very spacious even though it's only 12 feet wide because we really build everything out to the walls. Having the furniture on the walls in the living room makes a big difference. Another view of the stair. We let the stair become a shelf, so the landing of the stair extends 18 inches into the kitchen. That made it really hard to drop in. We didn't think about that. Then there's the master bedroom. The curtains all close, black it out, and it becomes like a tent. At night, you can see over the baby carriage, you can see the pipe to the wood-burning stove. We crank that window and get the heat from the fireplace. You can see where that is. Looking back through the bathroom, also to the stair, and then the balcony. We have a monument view. My 2-year-old calls it Big Crayon. Washington Monument. And that's a view from the basement where we have another bedroom. So on a 500-foot lot, this is a 3-bedroom, 2-study house. And a lot of it is stair, so it was a real exercise. And then some views of the the exterior from the corner, blending into the vocabulary of the houses nearby. Nighttime view. The guy had a special lens. I talked about some of the green features, but again, the main point I want to make about the house being, another point, of course, the size of the house is another way that it's green. It's not small, it's 2,500 square feet, which is the American average, but I love comparing it to this ad, which is for an apartment you can buy in Manhattan. And that's the apartment, and that's my house. Of course, my house is 4 stories, but it's still about a half, maybe, this is what? This is 6,600 square feet. I've got 2,500. But the greenest thing about the house is the fact that it sits here in the city, that it's connected to metro and walking and biking, and that it completes a neighborhood that was struggling and now is struggling less. It's across the street from a housing project, and that it's a single-family house, but it's an urban house. And I think that is it. And it is 12:29. Oh, if you like this discussion and these stories, I should hawk my books. Suburban Nation, which I co-wrote with Andres Duany and Elizabeth Plater-Zyberk, just came out in a 10th anniversary edition. It's sold 100,000 copies, and you should read it. And then the new book, if you're interested in getting this kind of work done, is called The Smart Growth Manual, just out this year from McGraw-Hill, and I hope you'll consider picking that up as well. They're amazingly cheap on Amazon. And I thank you for your attention. Now, a lot of you have places